Okay, this is video number 2 on the little series of videos I'm doing here on my conversion of my 83 K30 crew cab from a long wheelbase to a short wheelbase. And if you happen to see the first video I did, I kind of used it just to concentrate on the part of this whole thing that gave me the most grief as far as researching, and that was actually on what type of cut to do. If you haven't seen that, take a peek at it if you're struggling with how to go about doing that, and you may actually come up with a different plan than what I did. I just after doing all the research, I decided to go with the 45-degree cut on mine, and thus far it's working out pretty good. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of go through the little individual steps I took and the little things that worked out good and didn't work out good, and kind of give you an idea how I went through this. So while I'm right here, one thing I did, and it was kind of by accident, most of the guys were using like a 4x4 or a big heavy piece of square tubing or something under the frame rail to support the cab on this thing when they were cutting it apart. I didn't have a big bottle jack that I was comfortable using under there, so I ended up using 2 individual bottle jacks, one on each side of the frame. And it was completely by accident, but it ended up being kind of handy because when I went to put all this thing back together, it was nice to be able to manipulate each side of the frame separately for lining it up. So that part worked pretty good. So just a quick little thing there that I accidentally figured out. So anyway, went and I'll just kind of go through how I did the cut and the weld, and you guys have probably all seen this, but this is just the way it worked out for me. Like I say, I went with a 45. That did a couple things for me. It avoided this hole because my seam's back here, and then when it runs down through here, it avoids this little, you can see it from the outside where that frame changes pitch right there. It avoids that as well, so it worked out pretty good for me. So we'll go over here. I got a chunk of frame here. This is one of the pieces I cut out. Nothing too special about it. What I did before I did any cutting, I just sort of rough measured everything, and then just kind of went up and ground all the paint and gunk off of here. I did the same thing on the top of it, and the only reason I did that was so my square, when I was marking my 45s, had a nice true edge to go by, so as my marks were right. So most of the cutting I did on this thing was with my Sawzall. The only place maybe where I didn't use that is on some of these corners here, where I didn't want to overcut and get into part of the good frame that I was going to put together. That's when I used this just a thin cut-off wheel on my side grinder to do a couple of those little spots. So when I did the cutting, and obviously that kind of goes without saying, it creates a little more grinding, but I probably left somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch extra, just so I had some room for, smoothing it off, fitting it, and making sure everything was going to work on the pick there. So that's the chunk I took out, 14 inches. That's a magical number on these things on the front. And if I forget to bring it up later when we get to the back, and that's why I'm going to do a whole video on the back, because there's some variance on the amount you're pulling off the back of the frame. But this guy here, that's 14 inches set in stone. I've never heard anybody say anything different. So anyway, I got everything cut, got all the welds smoothed off, all that kind of fun stuff you do. And this piece of angle iron's just a representation. I used bigger, heavier stuff when I did it, but after I got everything cut and kind of put together, I just had one of them on the top like that, and then another one on the bottom. Clamped them all together, that kind of a thing. You'll go through a whole bunch of C-clamps when you're doing this if you want it to hold good. So clamped it all up, double checked measurements, measure holes front to back. I measured sideways. I even did some measuring on the floor and put some pieces of tape down and was using a plumb bob just to double check, make sure everything I was doing was right. I sure didn't want this thing to go down the road sideways or anything. So I got it all tacked and was comfortable with both sides and comfortable with all my measurements. And so that's when I kind of went in here and just started welding. And if you've looked at this at all or have done any welding at all, you know you don't want to just come in here and just burn this sucker in and make a bunch of heat. What I did is didn't matter where, but I started on a spot here, and then I'd actually go over to the other side, do that same spot in there, come back over here and do a different spot, and then just kind of work my way around. So I wasn't making a bunch of heat up and that kind of thing. welded inside and outside, made sure I got good penetration, ground everything off and checked for that, and then just kind of went from there. I'm going to come around here and get a little better look at the diamond plate I put in here. If you can see in there very good. If I had a regret about the diamond plate, and you can probably see there towards the front, I would have made it longer if I could have, but you can see there on the front it's real close to that cross member, and in the back there I probably could have extended it back a little bit, but I just wouldn't have been able to get a very good weld in there. The picture's a little deceiving, but there's just not a lot of room in there, so it is what it is. I'd like to do it different, but I just couldn't make it work any better than what I did here. You can see I rounded the corners off. If you've done any research, you don't want a sharp corner on your diamond plate. There's an opportunity for a crack there. So that's how I did that. It burned in there real nice. The other thing I did is on the outside here, I'm not going to use my saddle tanks, or at least that's my plan so far. I'm going to look into that blazer tank conversion thing in the back there. And so in this area here, there's one of them that's still left, but any hole that came in where that diamond plate was, after I had the perimeter of that welded in there, I went ahead and burn all them holes shut real nice and hot. So actually I got some support on the plate in the middle of it, not just around the outside. So I think that is about all I have for right now. I don't, everything went together fairly well. Like I say, I can't express enough. Measure before you cut, and then measure in the middle of the welding. The deeper you get into the welding, of course, the harder it's going to be to fix anything if you figure out it's off. So stay tuned. The next thing I'm going to do is concentrate on what I found and what I had to do on the back. In researching this thing, it seemed like everybody's all worried about what went on up there, and there's actually a little bit more to the back end of this thing, and some discrepancies that I ran into that I hadn't pondered. So stay tuned, and number 3 will be about this. Thanks for watching.